Good morning. Welcome to day 40 in Bible in a Year as we explore the Bible in 365 days, the greatest love story of all, the story of love between God and his people. Today we're continuing through our period of Egypt and Exodus, following the Adventure Timeline by Jeff Cavins and the New International Version. My name is Pastor Jay Lutz, and today we're going to be going through Exodus chapter 22, Leviticus chapter 15, and Psalm 76. This is we're going to be going through in Exodus 22. God sets the laws before Moses at the tent of meeting concerning the protection of property and social responsibility. In Leviticus, the Lord speaks to Moses and Aaron concerning discharges that cause uncleanliness. And Psalm 76 is a song of Asaph, like we read yesterday with Psalm 75. And this again is a psalm of praise, like Psalm 75. So let's get into it. Exodus chapter 22. If a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it, or sells it, he must pay back 5 head of cattle for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. If a thief is caught breaking in and is struck so that he dies, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. But if it happens after sunrise, he is guilty of bloodshed. A thief must certainly make restitution, but if he has nothing, he must be sold to pay for his theft. If the stolen animal is found alive in his possession, whether ox or donkey or sheep, he must pay back double. If a man grazes his livestock in a field or vineyard and lets them stray and they graze in another man's field, he must make restitution for the best of his own field or vineyard. If a fire breaks out and spreads into thorn bushes so that it burns shocks of grain, or standing grain, or the whole field, the one who started the fire must make restitution. If a man gives his neighbor silver or goods for safekeeping and they are stolen from the neighbor's house, the thief, if he is caught, must pay back double. But if the thief is not found, the owner of the house must appear before the judges, determine whether he has laid his hands on the other man's property. In all cases of illegal possession of an ox or a donkey, a sheep, a garment, or any other lost property about which somebody says, "This is mine," both parties are bringing their cases before the judges. The one who the judges declare guilty must pay back double to his neighbor. If a man gives a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to his neighbor for safekeeping, and it dies, or is injured, or is taken away while no one is looking, the issue between them will be settled by taking of an oath before the Lord that the neighbor did not lay hands on the other man's property. The owner is to accept this, and no restitution is required. But if the animal was stolen from the neighbor, he must make restitution to the owner. If it was torn to pieces by a wild animal, he shall bring in the remains as evidence, and he will not be required to pay for the torn animal. If a man borrows an animal from his neighbor, and it is injured or dies while the owner is not present, he must make restitution. But if the owner is with the animal, the borrower will not have to pay. If the animal was hired, the money paid for the hire covers the loss. If a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and sleeps with her, he must pay the bride price, and she shall be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must still pay the bride price for virgins. Do not allow a sorceress to live. Anyone who has sexual relations with an animal must be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord must be destroyed. Do not mistreat an alien or oppress him, for you are aliens in Egypt. Do not take advantage of a widow or an orphan. If you do, and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. My anger will be aroused, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will become widows, your children fatherless. If you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not be like a moneylender. Charge him no interest. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, return it to him by sunset, because his cloak is the only covering he has for his body. What else will he sleep in? When he cries out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. Do not blaspheme God or curse the ruler of your people. Do not hold back offerings from your granaries or your vats. You must give me the firstborn of your sons. Do the same with your cattle and your sheep. Let them stay with their mother for 7 days, but give them to me on the 8th day. You are to be my holy people, so do not eat meat of an animal torn by wild beasts. Throw it to the dogs. There's our first reading. Our second reading comes from Leviticus Chapter 15. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when any man has a bodily discharge, the discharge is unclean. Whether it continues flowing from his body or is blocked, it will make him unclean. This is how discharge will bring about uncleanliness. Any bed the man with the discharge lies on will be unclean, and anything he sits on will be unclean. Anyone who touches his bed must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean till evening. Whoever sits on anything that a man with a discharge sat on must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean till evening. Whoever touches the man who has a discharge must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean till evening. If the man with the discharge spits on somebody who is clean, that person must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean till evening. Everything the man sits on when riding will be unclean. Whoever touches any of the things that were under him will be unclean till evening. Whoever picks up these things must wash their clothes and bathe with water. He will be unclean till evening. Anyone the man with the discharge touches without rinsing his hands with water must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean till evening. A clay pot that the man touches must be broken, and any wooden article is to be rinsed with water. When a man is cleansed from his discharge, he is to count off 7 days for his ceremonial cleansing. He must wash his clothes and bathe himself with fresh water, and he will be clean. On the 8th day he must take 2 doves and 2 young pigeons and come before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting, and give them to the priests. The priest is to sacrifice them, the one for sin offering, the other for burnt offering. In this way he will make atonement before the Lord for the man because of his discharge. When a man has emission of semen, he must bathe his whole body with water, and he will be unclean till evening. Any clothing or leather that has semen on it must be washed with water, and it will be unclean till evening. While a man lies with a woman, and there is an emission of semen, both must bathe with water, and they will be unclean till evening. When a woman has her regular flow of blood, the impurity of her monthly period will last 7 days, and anyone who touches her will be unclean till evening. Anything she lies on during her period will be unclean, and anything she sits on will be unclean. Whoever touches her bed must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean till evening. Whoever touches anything she sits on must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean till evening. Whether it is the bed or anything she is sitting on, when anyone touches it, he will be unclean till evening. If a man lies with her, and her monthly flow touches him, he will be unclean for 7 days. Any bed he lies on will be unclean. When a woman has a discharge of blood for many days at a time, other than her monthly period, or has a discharge that continues beyond her period, she'll be unclean as long as she has the discharge, just as in the days of her period. Any bed she lies on while her discharge continues will be unclean, as if her bed during her monthly period, and anything she sits on will be unclean, as during her period. Whoever touches them will be unclean. He must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean till evening. When she is cleansed from her discharge, she must count off 7 days, and after that she will be ceremonially clean. On the 8th day she must take 2 doves and 2 young pigeons, and bring them to the priest to the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest is to sacrifice one for sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. In this way he will make atonement for her because the Lord for the uncleanliness of her discharge. You must keep the Israelites separate from things that make them unclean, so that they will not die in their uncleanliness, for defiling my dwelling place, which is among them. These are regulations for a man with a discharge, for anyone made unclean by emission of semen, for a woman in her monthly period, for a man or a woman with a discharge, and for a man who lies with a woman who is ceremonially unclean. And that's our second reading. And our last reading is Psalm 76. In Judah, God is known. His name is great in Israel. His tent is in Salem, his dwelling place in Zion. Then he broke the flashing arrows, the shield and the swords, the weapons of war. You are resplendent with light, more majestic than mountains, rich with game. Valiant men lie plundered. They sleep their last sleep. Not one of his warriors can lift his hand at your rebuke, O God of Jacob, whose horse and chariot lie still. You alone are to be feared. Who can stand before you when you are angry? From the heavens you pronounced judgment, and the land feared and was quiet. When you, O God, rose up to judge, to save all the afflicted of the land, surely your wrath against men brings you praise, and the survivors of your wrath are restrained. Make vows to the Lord your God and fulfill them. Let all the neighbors' lands bring gifts to the one to be feared. He breaks the spirit of rulers. He is feared by the kings of the earth. Here ends our psalm. What a beautiful psalm. More majestic than mountains rich with game. Valiant men lay plundered, and they sleep their last sleep. But yet, God is the one who, it says, we are to make vows to, because he breaks the spirit of the rulers, and he brings gifts to the ones who fear. So when we submit to God, he watches over us and he brings us gifts of his gifts. So again, it calls us to be in a place of humility before God in order that he might gift us with all his goodness. That's really worth remembering. Also, we hear in Leviticus, we hear about all the discharges, whether it be bodily fluid or semen or a woman's period. And just interesting, the distinctions that are made here. It just kind of shows the particularness of uncleanliness during these days. They don't have any modern advance in technology or medicine, so this is what they did. Then we also see in Exodus the protection of property. And I think it's really clear here about the intention of the things that we do when it comes to how we deal with our neighbors. And how it's important that we do things not in secrecy, but that we're straightforward about things, that we don't purposefully and intentionally harm others or do anything that causes for our neighbor to sin or for us to sin. And then we lastly hear about social responsibility, what we're to do with widows and orphans and virgins who are pledged to be married. And that, back in the day, if you slept with a woman, you are to therefore pay the bride price and marry her. And so it was pretty straightforward how you were to treat women with the respect that is deserved, in the sense that you don't take advantage of their body, that you respect them enough that if you're going to do that with them, that you're doing an act that's socially binding. And then we don't take advantage of people. We don't blaspheme or curse God, but that we give of our best. Here again, you must give the firstborn of your son. Do the same thing with your cattle and your sheep. You are to be my holy people, God says. I think that's important. We are to be God's people, and we are to give him the respect and honor that he deserves, because he is a God who made all things. He created all things. Everything came into being through God, and everything that we have is his and his alone. And so we have to remember that, and we just give a little of what he's given us everything. We're just to give the best, the first bit, the best of the first bit. It says he just requires the firstborn. Nothing more. I mean, you could have many kids, and yet God only requires the first bit. Why? Because it's to show that he's the most important in our lives. And it's important that we give credit where credit's due and give God the credit where it's due, because God gives us all things. My prayer for you today is that you might always think upon how God cares for you, and he goes through very specifically the things that he goes through specifically all the things that build for good relationships amongst our neighbors and God. And just, I pray that you would give that same love and care and respect for God. May you pray for me as we go through this Bible in year, and I pray that you might continue to grow in the knowledge and the wisdom and the fear of God. Have a blessed day.